The case of Steven Avery is one that has gotten a lot of people's attention, but not exactly for the best reasons. You see, he is someone who was accused of a crime, held in prison for years about it, and then was found to be completely innocent of the whole ordeal, which was a major miscarriage of justice. And then, not long after his release, he was arrested again for a crime, and there was a lot of curious things that went on in it. That's why Making a Murderer was focused on Avery and his life. Allow us to show you Steven Avery Update 2021. Is he still in prison? Number 7. The True Beginning. Before we talk of the now, we must talk of the then, correct? So let's start this off with how Avery started off. Steven Avery was born in 1962 in Manitowoc County, Wisconsin, to Alan and Dolores Avery. Since 1965, his family has operated a salvage yard in rural Gibson, Wisconsin, on the 40-acre property where they lived outside of town. Avery has 3 siblings, Chuck, Earl, and Barb. He attended public schools on nearby Michigan and Manitowoc, where his mother said he went to an elementary school for slower kids. According to one of his lawyers in 1985, school records showed that his intelligence quotient was 70, and he could barely function in school. Not a good sign of things to come, if we can be honest. On July 24, 1982, Avery married Lori Mathieson, who was a single mother. They have 4 children together, Rachel, Jenny, and twins Stephen and Will. As his life went on, it was clear that there were some things wrong with him, and some would argue that this meant his future problems were all but assured. But if you look deeper, you might actually question that. Number 6. Law troubles. It's fair to say that Avery was not the greatest person on earth, as he did have trouble with the law from time to time, specifically in the 80s. His first offense was going and robbing a store with a friend, and that got him 10 months in jail. Then he apparently killed his cat alongside some friends. That led him to go back to jail for animal cruelty. In 1985, that year proved to be one of the worst of his life, as apparently his cousin was spreading very unflattering rumors about him, and he ran her off the road and pointed an unloaded gun at her to get her to stop doing that. He was sentenced for 6 years for that crime. But also in 1985, he was accused of something that he would later be proven innocent for after 18 years. Number 5. The false arrest. In July of 1985, a woman named Penny BEERNTSEN was assaulted and violated while on a jog one day. During a photo lineup, she said it was Avery who was attacker. You'd think that would be a pretty definitive statement, as she was the one assaulted and thus would know the face of her attacker. But as you likely already know, this was only the beginning of a very complicated matter. We say that because Avery was 40 miles away in Green Bay shortly after the attack. An alibi supported by a time-stamped store receipt and 16 witnesses. That's a lot of people saying he wasn't there, and yet he was arrested and charged with the crime, getting 32 years in jail for it. What's worse is that 2 different appeal attempts were denied in subsequent years. In 1995, a detective made a call to the jail that Avery was at and noted that an inmate had admitted committing an assault years ago in Manitowoc County and that someone else was in jail for it. The sheriff at the jail didn't believe him, and thus Avery remained in jail, which says a lot when you think about what happened next. Finally, in 2002, the Innocent Project used DNA evidence to prove that Avery was indeed innocent and that a man named Gregory Allen had done the deed. What's important to note here is that Allen and Avery honestly did look alike, so at the very least, this was a case of mistaken identity gone horribly wrong. But while that should have been the happiest point in Avery's recent life, it was all too brief. Number 4. TERESA HALBACH. TERESA HALBACH was a photographer born in 1980. 25 years later, in early November, she went missing and her parents called in to the police to let them know that their daughter was missing. Now, lest you think her parents were just overreacting, they hadn't seen their daughter in days and she lived right next door to them. So if anyone had noticed that she was gone, it would be her parents. HALBACH was known to have visited the Avery salvage yard in Manitowoc County on October 31, 2005, just days before her death. On November 10, 2005, following the discovery of her Toyota RAV4 partially concealed on the Avery property, Calumet County Sheriff Jerry Pagel conducted a search and found the charred remains of HALBACH. Her cell phone, license plates, and a car key were all recovered. A few days later, Steven Avery's blood was found in her vehicle, a clear sign that he was involved in part or in whole with what happened to her, or at least that's what many stated. Avery was charged with the kidnapping and murder of HALBACH, mutilation of a corpse, and illegal possession of a firearm. Number 3. Controversy. Almost from the get-go, there were issues with the case, not least of which was that some of the county sheriffs and law enforcement who were involved in proving Avery guilty of the previous crime, they were allowed to investigate the new case despite there being a civil suit against them by Avery. And some of the key evidence was indeed found by them. But as Avery's lawyers noted multiple times, not only was there a conflict of interest, there was evidence that was clearly tampered with, including a vial of Avery's blood from his wrongful conviction that had been unsealed, and a puncture wound was in the top as if to draw blood from the vial. Avery himself noted that this was a frame-up because of his suing the county for what they did to him. Another controversy that came about was that of his nephew, Brendan Ray Dassey, who confessed to helping Avery with the attack on Teresa. But later, he recanted as he said he was coerced by cops as they didn't let him have a lawyer. Avery was found guilty of first-degree murder and illegal possession of a firearm and was sentenced to life in prison, as well as not getting the possibility of parole. His story would have ended there until... Number 2. Making a Murderer. In January 2016, after Making a Murderer had been released on Netflix, People magazine reported that one of the Avery trial jurors was the father of a Manitowoc County Sheriff's deputy, and another juror's wife was a clerk with Manitowoc County. That's a clear violation of jury code, and yet it was allowed. Juror Richard Mahler, who was excused from the trial after the jury had begun deliberations because of a family emergency, he later commented that early on, 7 of the jurors had voted not guilty. He was mystified that the jury eventually agreed on the guilty verdict. Mahler's account has been disputed by other jury members who claim that no early vote had taken place and that an informal vote was taken with only 3 jury members voting Avery not guilty. Another juror allegedly told the Making a Murderer filmmakers of feeling intimidated into returning a guilty verdict, fearing for personal safety, though these 2 have been disputed by those tied to the opposition in the case. Number 1. The latest on Avery. So where is Steven Avery right now, and what is he doing? Very recently, he appealed his latest unanimous legal defeat, asking the Wisconsin Supreme Court to take the case. A unanimous Wisconsin appeals court in July rejected Avery's request to hold a hearing on new evidence that he wanted to present for a new trial. Avery has been fighting unsuccessfully for years to have his conviction overturned. His latest appeal asked the Wisconsin Supreme Court to review 3 issues: failure to disclose evidence, the destruction of bone fragments, and ineffective assistance of counsel. The Wisconsin Supreme Court is not required to take the case. If it does agree to hear it, the court would likely schedule oral arguments at a later date and issue a ruling months from now. Given the situation, we're pretty sure Avery will be willing to wait in order to ensure that he gets free. His lawyer is also adamant about all of this and wants justice done. So there might truly be some upcoming moves made should things go their way. If things go their way. So what do you think? What do you think of this look at the case of Steven Avery and how he is still in prison despite a lot of people trying to go and prove that he is innocent? Do you think that his situation will eventually change? Or do you think that he is going to be in prison forever because of outside forces? Let us know in the comments below, and we'll see you next time.